Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's three Prakim Rambam, Hilchos, Meiser, Prakim Zayin, Ches, and Tes. We are going to begin with Perek Zayin. We're going to learn yet another application in which we say that B'dinei Torah ein breira, only by rabbinic laws do we have this concept of retroactive clarification. We're going to learn various creative ways of giving Meiser, and we're going to have more applications of the rule that ein toirmin umasidin min aptur ala chiyuv. Perek Zayin has 13 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph, says the Rambam. If a person has 100 like of wine that are tevel by Torah law, and the person makes a statement, Shnei lugin sha'ani asid lahafresh mehen, that the two lugin that I will separate, well, that's truma. And then va'asora mi'ese ma'aserisha, the following 10, and we already spoke out that the Rambam doesn't mean exactly 10, and make no mistake that ma'aseris has to be given precisely. The Rambam really means 9.8. That's what it always means, is ma'aserisha. In other words, he's saying all of this verbally, and then the following approximately. You don't give it in approximation, but the Rambam is just rounding off the numbers. Okay, so then says the Rambam, even though he made such a statement, he may not begin to consume the wine with the intent, I'm going to leave these approximately 22% at the end. I made the declaration, I will not drink into the Trumas Umaisvis. Is that okay? The answer would be, it depends whether we apply Breira or not. If we were to apply the principle of Breira, if we would say that there's such a thing called retroactive clarification, then a person would be allowed to consume. Because whenever later you're going to actually physically separate the Trumas Umaisvis, that's going to be already effective retroactively. But since we're speaking about Tevel Min HaTorah, based on the rule that we don't say Breira B'dinei Torah, so you can't rely on that which you will do later. Ela Yaflish Achakach, Ela Yaflish first, you have to separate it. And only later, Yishta, are you allowed to drink? And Ve'enoimdim, that Zeh Shiniach B'soif will be Ki'ilu Nivrar Batchila. We can't say that. And ein oimdim b'shol Torah, breira, which means nachshoid ki'ilo nivrar ad sheyibar. Gevaldik. Halacha 2. Hakeveya ma'isroisav b'fi hachavius. If a person specifies where they're going to be leaving their trumas u'maisros, and they say, I'm leaving it, where in the location will be at the opening of the jug of wine. So then the din is, lo yishta, you may not drink even from the bottom of the barrel. Even though your declaration is effective and trumais must be separated from the top. But whenever we speak about liquids, liquids are considered to be something that are constantly intermingling one drop with the other. So that which is in the top, it permeated that which is in the bottom. Or if the person similarly says, I'm going to separate the tithes from the bottom of the barrel. Okay, that statement is effective. But you may not drink from the top of the barrel, because since we're speaking about liquids, liquids intermingle. In contrast, but if a person specifies that here we're speaking about solids, that I'm going to be separating the grain or the legumes or whatever it is from the top, from the opening of the storage container, or then you are allowed to eat that which is in the other part of the container, because solids don't intermingle. Then yes, oichel mipiyom. No, it's davar yavesh will be different than a davar lach, than liquid. Halacha gimel. Yesh la'adam l'keboya. Now we're going to be learning more about this verbal designation. That's called to be koiveya. Yesh la'adam l'keboya ma'aser sheni. You can designate, and then you can right away redeem it on money. And then here we're speaking about a person who separated Ma'aser Sheni prior to Ma'aser Rishon. So even though you made Meiser Sheni, now that you redeemed it, you can now use that as the Meiser Rishon. Or you can use the redeemed Meiser Sheni to be Trumas Meiser, where L'makim Acher. Because once it's redeemed, it's part of the Chevra again. Halacha Dalet. You separated produce, and you're going to use them to be the separation. Now, and in other words, this guy is saying like this: this will be always used for meiser. So you have in this area, let's say 100 pounds, and as you have other produce for which you have to give meiser rishon, so you keep on saying, okay, now another 10 pounds, another 15 pounds from here will be meiser rishon for there. And you plan to go through the whole thing. And when everything is designated as meiser rishon, you plan to give it to the Levi. So mafresh aleim, you may continuously do so. Bechezka shehem kayamim, with the presumption that that which you set aside is still here. And therefore, based on it, and then you give it to the Levi. So what's the chiddush? The chiddush is maybe you have to check prior to every designation. You don't have to do so. You can presume this produce is kaya. But if you discover that the produce that you set aside was lost, then you don't know when it got lost. So what's the din? And nothing that you did until now, right, is known to be properly tithed. In other words, you have to take off meisris again, but that will be all misafik. Halacha 5. You lend money. If a person lend money to a kohen, a person loaned money to a Levi, a person loaned money to an ani. Why? In other words, his goal is, let's say you're a kohen, I loaned you money. So, and I'm saying that when I am going to have truma, which I have to gift, I won't gift it. I'm going to sell it to any kohen who's going to give me money. And I'm going to take that money as a repayment from the money that you kohen, you owe me. Interesting way. Or if it comes to a Meiser Rishon has no Kedusha. So if I lend money to a Levi, I'm telling the Levi that, you owe me now $1,000. The first $1,000 worth of Meiser Rishon, I'm not going to give to any Levi. I'm going to keep, and I'll keep it as payment from the money that you owe me. That's the case over here. So the din is, mafrish aleim becheska she'en kayomim. You can presume that the kohen who owes you money is alive. The Levi who owes you money is alive, which gives you the right to keep or to sell the truma as payment, because the lender is chayiv to give you. It's as if you're giving it to them. Here also, the or maybe the ani became wealthy, and if that would be the case, then you may not use meiser ani as payment, as if you gave it to the ani because he's no longer an ani. How would you make such a separation? This creative way of getting payment of money that you loaned, and now really you can't keep it, but really there has to be a step of someone lifting it up on behalf of that kohen that halachically we are presuming is still alive, or the Levi, or the ani that you borrowed. So now this belongs to them, and then you take it back. So now they paid you, and by the truma you'll have to sell it. And by the Meiser Rishon, you'll get to keep it. Brilliant. If you always give your trumas to that kohen or your Meiser Rishon to that Levi, if that's the way you took a habit upon yourself, you don't even need to have this step. Now, after this guy, the lender, makes these separations, he calculates how much money is it worth. You, Levi, owe me $1,000. My Meiser Rishon is worth $200. If that is the correct number, then I say, okay, now you, Levi, you don't owe me $1,000. You only owe me $800 because I'm keeping your Meiser Rishon as part payment. So the Meiser Rishon you keep, the Meiser Ani you can keep. Truma has Kedusha. And you can go ahead and eat the maisvus. Halacha zayin. Now, when you are making this financial calculation, now it's advantageous to the lender to give this produce less value, because like this, you can continuously do so, or you can get more for your loan. You are allowed to do it. You are allowed to use the most inexpensive price, and we don't say, this is like ribbis, because you're not exaggerating. There is a higher market price, there's a lower market price. If it's in the realm of market price, it's not ribbis. Another Gavaldik rule, that even if Shemitah comes, and let's say you didn't make the prusbul, monies that Shemitah relinquishes are monies that you plan to collect. Since you made this creative system where de facto you won't be collecting anything, you'll be keeping the meiser that you separated. That's not called collecting. That is a debt for which Shemitah doesn't prohibit you of taking. You're not going to get the payment. The payment is already on your possession. So you can continuously do so. Even though Shemitah came and went, now if the lender wants to nullify this agreement, wow. He cannot go back. But if the borrowers, the Kohen or the Levi, at any time they can say, we don't want to follow through with this agreement. I owe you the money. I'll pay you the money, but you can't take my Trumas U'Maisas. Now, another thing, if the owners had yield of ever getting payment back, so then once you despair of not getting paid, that debt halachically is no longer there. Because you may not make separations on a debt that's considered lost. How is something lost? Whenever a lender gives up hope of getting payment, it's considered a lost loan. But if those borrowers passed away, now because now they're not there. But you can argue, but 1 second, but the heirs owe money. The Yarshim, they have to agree to it. And even there, that the person who borrowed the money left real estate, which is why the loan is still owed by the heirs. So if they agree to continue with this agreement, you can make use of it. And the dinner is that he doesn't have to leave real estate in the value of the loan, because we can always say when it comes to real estate that the smallest amount of property is worth tremendous amounts of money. As we all know, when it comes to real estate, you can't put a value on real estate. You can argue at that location, a little centimeter is worth $1 million, like here in LA. But if the borrower only left money, even if the Yodesh will agree, it will be ineffective, because the debts of the father are not binding on the heirs, even though it's a mitzvah for the heirs to pay back the debts of the father, but it's not a binding loan, and therefore you cannot retain the Trumas U'Maisas. Now, on the condition, Almanas, Sheyafrish, Alamois, Elamechalkam, this whole creative way was not in front of a Beis Din. Now, you don't need to take rishus from the Yarshim, because the Chachamim made a takana for one to be allowed to make the stipulation that will even be binding on the heirs, even though by the regular rules of debts and a passing of the principle and how the debts are or are not transferred, here the Chachamim found it advantageous for such agreements to be standing, because this will make people want to lend money to Kahanim and Leviim, because they feel secured that they can get the payment. And they only feel secured with the knowledge that even if the borrower passes away, they will still be able to get the payment by retaining the Trumas or the Maises. So it's really, in the bigger picture, it's good for Kohanim and Leviim for such an agreement, if it's made in front of the Beis Din, to continuously be binding. Now, Heshen Ani, the moment this Ani, God willing, will become wealthy, Ema Frish and Olav, even though the stipulation was made in front of a Beis Din, and the Zach Allah Mashabiyadai, because here it's different. Here, you cannot retain Meiser Ani for someone who is not an Ani. Halacha 8. Yisrael Sha'amal ben Levi, Koir Meiser Yesh L'cha B'yadi. I have a Koir of Meiser Shem, and he didn't give it to him yet. The shoy ben Levi lasoisei trumas maser al makam acher afal pi shel mashach. Even prior to the Levi receiving that large amount of Meiser Rishon, the Levi can say, "Oh, perfect! Now that I have another car, I have 10 koidim of Meiser Rishon in my home already. I'm designating what you will give me as trumas Meiser." And even though he did not take possession, the son of Yisrael Levi Achad. However, since he did not do Mashiach, if the Yisrael wrongfully, he shouldn't have done it ethically, but if he gives this to another Levi, which means really he was machshel the Levi to eat tevel, because the Levi thought he gave Trumas Meiser, turned out it wasn't even his. So he has a container. He shouldn't do it. He's going to be machshel the Levi, but it doesn't make it binding because the Levi never did Mashiach. If a person has produce in a Megura in a silo, and then also son to Levi, and he gives a son to a Levi, and another son to the Anim. And really what's going on over here is that he's saying that when I will separate from this silo 8 son, what I'm giving you right now, so guys, from a total of 10 son, you have to give 10% to the Levi and 10% to the Anim. And again, I know it's not exactly, because once you give 10% to the Levi, what remains is only 9. You only have to give 0.9. That doesn't matter. The Rambam is just rounding it off again. But if a person pre-gives for the next 8, so says the Rambam, Lo yafresh shmoyin esoyim and amagur v'yochel oisam, ella im ken yodeya, that the 2 saw that you prepaid are still intact. Because if it's no longer intact, prepayment, pre-giving won't be effective. You have to find out how much is left, and only from that which is intact can you now say, that which I gave the Levi should be my sedition for what I'm taking out right now. Halacha Yud. Anim shechlifu mat nesem in balabais. If a poor person exchanged the gifts, what do I mean exchange the gifts? Kegoin shenasna lo yisasha leke lo shikcho peyo meiser ani. All right, and v'natlu samin hagoyden. In other words, the owner is being very generous with aniyim, and normally that's the rule. You can leave inferior products for leket, right? That's what normally for peya you can leave the inferior product, but you went ahead and you want to give him great quality. And not on the Hempatim and Amaisres. Afalpisha Nasis Birishus Balabayis. The not Lumimenu is going to be Chayiv. Afalpishu Chelev Matlisayim Hapturim. Halach Yudal Vishoilofan of Steak Alkaloishal Tevel. If you have 2 baskets of Tevel, Shenitlu Trumasam, from which Truma was already separated. And now you have to separate Meiser Ishin, and you make a statement, Meiser Zu. The zoo, the meiser that's in basket 1, I'm going to take from basket number 2. So the din is harishoina meu seres, because perfect, the meiser of basket number 1 is indeed going to be given from basket number 2. Of course, what's the chiddush? The next case. But if he continues to say meiser zu vizu, he goes both ways. The meiser from basket 1, I'm going to separate from 2. The meisters from basket number 2, I will separate from meister number 1. Well, the first basket is properly tied. Shadei kava meister sel b'shniya, because he was koiveya, and koiveya doesn't mean he separated, but this declaration is suffice. But once you made that declaration, what does it come out? It comes out that you already tied, you took off meister edition from basket number 2, right? For basket number 1. So basket number 1 is already misukan. Once basket number 1 is mesukan, that means it's exempt from it being a tithe. You cannot use produce that's already mesukan, that's already potter, and from it separate meisters for a chiyuv. The Ein Hashnimu says, "She'ei mafrishin meiser min harishon ishkadim trumel shniya, shadayin hi chayev zu meiser shteyem." In other words, that's a great application of Ein Toirim min umasrin min aptur al chiyuv. Halacha Yud Beis. Omar, if he says meiser shtei kalkol seilu. Not, he makes one statement. So this is an effective way to establish. This is effective. ukfar kova master saying bahem, and the omoitzi mehena meiser shalahem, and the eni yochaloitzi ele meiser shalamakamacher. It's effective to the point that now you're obligated to separate the 10% of each basket from the other basket. Now, the case of Ma'asan, how do you do it? Moitzi meiser shtei ma'achas mehem. You actually take out both meisers from one basket. Oy meiser kol achas mehem mimeno. Only if the quantities were correct. Okay. No, the point is we have to do it at the same time. But mafresh, you have to first separate it from minaktano, and you take from the katana the meiser, which won't be all of it. You're taking from the smaller basket. You can't take 10%. The 10% will only be for part of the gedolah because the gedolah is bigger. In other words, if the baskets are not of the same size, then there will be a part of the gedolah that's still tevel. Like this, you make sure, what you have to make sure is that in order for you to be allowed to separate from one basket for the other, this basket cannot be fully mesukim. You can make it into two steps if one basket is small and one basket is big. So when you separate 10% of the small for the big, you didn't cover all of the big. So there is a part of the gedolah that's still chayiv. That is the one that you can separate for the katana. Okay. Perek Ches. Perek Ches is going to first clarify the meaning of the word chulin versus the words chulin misukanim. Even though they both sound that it was fixed, it's not tevel, but no, we're meduyik. We're going to learn a lot of what were to happen if tevel gets mixed into chulin. What are we to do if tevel gets mixed into meiser rishon that was not yet kaid? You didn't yet take the trumas meiser. We're going to learn a case where someone is koiveya from where he is going to be taking trumas meiser. That means you made this declaration, and once you made a declaration, you have to follow the kfiyus that you said. Perek Ches has 9 halachas. It's in quantity a relatively short chapter, but it's going to get very interesting. And Baruch Hashem, we have a lot of pictures towards the end that will be very helpful in understanding the cases that the Rambam will be talking about. Perek Ches halacha al. Guys, whoever is going to be fasting, just a heads up that the fast begins in 5 minutes from now. So, chaparai. Hapedes shuhure mehem truma gedolah v'trumas meiser. When you have produce, you already separated truma gedolah. You separated trumas meiser, as we said, that the owner, the Yisrael, can separate the meiser min ha-meiser. In other words, taking away that right from the Levi. But here we're speaking about someone that did not yet separate meiser rishon. He did separate all of the trumas, truma gedolah and trumas meiser. That produce is called chulin. It's not perfect because you still have to separate meiser rishon, however, and meiser sheni. But the truma has the highest level of severity. So that you result. If you took off all of the other meisers, that is where we call the remaining produce chulin misukanim. And that these expressions are used in all places. So now it's important to remember that. Chulin versus chulin misukanim. Halacha 2. Tevel shenis arev b'chulin misukanim. So if you have mamish tevel, now as we'll see in a moment, here tevel means that you already separated truma gedolah, as we'll see in the numbers that Rambam is going to give. What you did not yet separate is trumas meiser. Let's not forget, guys, that trumas meiser from the original pile is 1%, right? Because trumas meiser is 10% from 10%. So that's the tevel here. You needed still to separate another 1% for the kohen. And now, before you did it, this tevel falls into chulin v'sukan. So if it's min b'minoi, and the rule is, my friends, that tevel asers b'mashahu, it's never bottle. Why is tevel never bottle? Guys, we just had this a few in Hilchas Trumais, because anything davar sheyesh loy matirin is not bottle. Why would it be bottle? It's min b'minoi. All you need to do is to separate that extra 1%. And 1 second, isn't there a concept of it completely losing? It's not even nice and tam. Yeah, that you only say when it's min b'she'ein. Because if there would be a min, even if it's davar she'ef shel sakein, that Rambam is saying, there would be the bittul of 1 in 60 approximately, but not in the case of min b'minoi. So like this, im yesh le peiros acheres, moitzi al oisoi tevel truma umaislis lefi cheshbon. If you have other produce, that means if you're not separating it from this mixture itself, say that you owe 1% of the tevel. So separate it from that other location. But if you don't have other produce, then first of all, you have to make the separation. And again, why are you being mafresh? So you're going to say, Echad mimeya from the tevel. Says the Rambam, no, there's a takanas chachamim that you won't get away by only separating 1% of the tevel that fell into the chulun misukanim. Mafsid min chulun misukanim kedei trumas meiser shel tevel. In other words, you lose the same amount that you have to separate, which is the 1% of the tevel. You have to add to that, right, the same amount, which will come off the chulun misukanim. Had the tevel not got mixed into the chulun misukanim are fully yours to eat. The tevel is something from which you have to separate 1%. That you have to separate 1% and another 1%. Ketzad, for example, if you had meya social tevel, again, the word tevel here, as the Rambam will say, tevel can also mean something that you didn't even separate to 2% of truma. That's not the case first. The case over here is that all you need to do is remove from the 100 saw 1%. You did not remove the truma smeiser. So from the 100 saw, 1 saw has to go to the coin. And you didn't remove it yet. And now this 100 saw fell into 100 saw of chulun misukanim, which should have been completely yours. So what's the din? Mafresh min hakoil meya va'achas. First, you have to separate. How do you separate it? Oh, you separate it by taking out not 100. You're taking out 101. Now, this that you took out, is that the chulin or is that the tevel? That will be determined as the tevel. And now, guys, what's 1% from 101? 1.1. So it's the 0.1 that you're going to lose. Because you can't just say, okay, let me just separate them, and then I'm going to take off the tevel 1%. If you have other produce, no problem. Then you cheshbon, I owe, in our case, 1 sa'a for trumas meiser. I don't care that it's all mixed together. It doesn't matter. I'm going to take off 1% from another location. But if you want to separate it from the mixture, first you have to separate it. You want to separate halkot, the tevel, from the chulin. Even though you began with 100 and 100, you can't divide them into 100 and 100. What you're taking out will be deemed tevel, and you have to take out another 100. So you're going to remain now with 101 of tevel, 99 of chulin misukanim. The chol sheifrish is tevel. The yishar teishav tishim chulin misukanim. So the nimtzad comes out that mafsid sa'a achas. And again, the saw achas doesn't mean that you're going to lose the entire saw, but now that you have another saw in the pile that you now will consider tevel, from it, you have to separate the 1%. You're going to actually end up giving 1.1. Even worse, you didn't separate not even the truma, which means that this tevel, from it, you would have removed around 3%, right? 2% as truma gedoyla, and then another 1% for trumas meiser. So we do the same thing. When you separate this mixture, mafsid min hachulin hamisukalim kedei truma and meiser. In other words, you have to remove approximately 103 sa'a. And now from this 103 sa'a, you take off 3%. Now the question is why? Why do you have to do so? Says the Rambam, kedei shelo yoymar meya shehifrish meya shel chulin v'hameya shenishara hi atevel. You want to make sure that when you separate that which you took out of the mixture, would it be chulin, will it be tevel? The din is that which you take out is the tevel. But for you to remember that what you're taking out is the tevel, the way you'll remember it is by you needing to take out an addition. Because that will remind you, I have to give from here. You see, I took out an additional saw because really that was the amount that I should have separated prior to the mixture. And that's the way you'll remember. Doesn't matter. The example that Rambam began was 100 and 100. The Rambam says it makes no difference whether the tevel was less than the chulin, whether the tevel was more than the chulin. You knew how much tevel you had. You knew that whatever the amount of trumas needed to be separated, whether it's only trumas meiser or if it's both truma and trumas meiser, that amount you have to separate when you're dividing the pile again. Since what you are removing will be halachically the tevel part as a heker, you'll take out that additional part. Similarly, guys, just to know what meiser tavel means. Meiser means you separated meiserishin, but you did not take out of the meiserishin trumas meiser, whether it was you, whether it was the Levi. That's called meiser. That's still tevel. And if it falls into chulin misukanim, as we defined in the beginning of the Spedek, so here again, min b'minoi, there's no bittul. So now, what do you have to do? You'll have to separate the 10% of the meiser tavel. Now here again, if you have other produce that could be used to separate from there, meiser for here, and you don't have to add anything. However, you have no other produce other than this mixture. So here again, when you make, you have to remove the amount that came in it. And the Rambam is going to give in the next halacha numbers. But really, you have to take out that amount plus from the chulin misukanim, the amount of trumas meiser. Umafsid min hachulin misukanim kedei trumas meiser shiva meiser atavel halacha. For example, if you have 100 saw of meiser rishon. Now, what does that mean? Just to make it clear, if I have 100 saw of meiser rishon, how much of it do I have to separate? 10 saw, right? Meiser min ha-meiser. And prior to me separating the 10 saw, it got mixed into 100 chulin misukanim. So here again, the first step I have to do is I have to take out the amount of meiser rishon that's tavel. But I don't take out the 100 that fell in. I have to take out 110. Now it's going to chop again when I'm going to give meiser min ha-meiser. What am I giving? I'm not giving 10. I'm giving 11 now because I have to give meiser min ha-meiser from the new 110. Mafresh min ha-koil me'eva esed. And v'chol shehifresh is considered meiser. Meiser means meiser tavel. And only the 90 that I'll leave behind will be considered as they were originally chulin kishahayim. And even though, again, that Rambam begins by giving an example, we have the same amounts, 100 and 100. The rule is the same. Or if they were pchusim bimenu, always mafresh ha-meiser ukedeitu meiser shuva meiser atov melachulin. And from it, you'll do what you needed to do originally is to give the 10%. In contrast, now, halacha vav, what happens if you have tevel? Here, tevel means that you remove the truma gedolah, just again, like we had in the beginning, right? And you did not remove the trumas meiser, so that's not meiser tevel. We're speaking about normal tevel, that you remove truma gedolah, but you have to still remove the 1%. If it got mixed, the meiser tevel, in meiserishin, from which you did not yet remove the 10%. So im hoya hatevel kameiser, just as an example that I'm speaking about 100. So you have 100 saw of tevel. From it, really one saw would be going to a kohen. You had 100 meiser tevel. From that meiserishin, 10 saw would have been going to a kohen. So here, mafsid min hatevel kedei trumas meiser shabai. And not, in other words, you only lose from the tevel, not 10, only 1. Here we're more lenient, unlike in the previous cases. You don't have to remove 110. You get to only remove 101. Ketzad, here we go, numbers. Meya saw tevel, from which, really, you needed to remove one. Got mixed with Meya saw meiser. Meya saw meiser, meiserishon tevel, from which you needed to remove 10. They got mixed together. Min b'minoi, there's no bittul. Mafrish, not 110, which is what we learned in Halacha Hey. Here you only have to remove 101. Meya va'achas. And that which you remove is considered what? It's very important. That which you remove is not considered tevel. That which you removed is going to be considered the meiser tevel. V'zeh meiser. Now, just to make it clear, before the mixture, you had 100. How much would you have been giving? 10. Now, how much are you removing? 101. So there's going to be additional. So how much will the kohen get? The kohen is going to get 11. Is meiser? They remain tevel, from which you have to remove the 1%. Again, the mila here is, you see, all we need to do is we have to make this heker. So here it suffices to say that what you are removing is going to be considered the meiser tevel, and you're not taking out the 100, you're taking out the additional 1, and that will be the heker, that what you removed is considered the meiser tevel. Now, if the tevel was more than the meiser, let's go with numbers. You had 100 of tevel, and it fell into 90 of meiser tevel. So now, mafrish ha-meiser bolvad. All you remove is the meiser, and you won't take anything additional in the tevel. And as we'll explain in a moment, what you want to make sure is that you don't create dimua, and the din will be that meiser, mena meiser is bottle 1 in 100. It's going to come out in such a case that nimsa, in other words, if you won't have enough of tevel to be mevatel, that now new number of meiser, trumas meiser, then you're going to have a whole new other problem. So the Chachamim who made this takana of you needing to remove more, that's just another higoyin over here. To have a heker, they didn't do it in a case where it's going to ruin everything. Because she'im you cut a shame to this trumas meiser, and that which you take out, which is in the tevel, nimsa ha-meiser meduma, the trumas meiser shtava shalsa imay. And then it's not going to be bottle. In other words, if you're going to take out 102, and when you take out 102, if 2 will be considered meiser mina meiser, 2 in 100 is not 1 in 100. It won't be bittul. Now, hoya, another case. Hoya meiser mina mishal tevel. Again, the case over here is an halacha of tevel, from which you did not remove trumas meiser, from which you needed to remove still 1%. Fell into meiser rishon, from which you did not remove the 10%. Now, if the meiser was meruba ala tevel, what we're going to say right now is you must separate the tevel from the mixture, koida shein letrumas meiser shebe tevel, and then umafrish ha tevel. Here we're going to not like we had in the beginning of Allah Chavav when it was equal, or where you had the numbers where tevel was meruba. If meiser is meruba, here we're going to say what you remove should be the tevel. And here we will say, like we said before, don't only remove the number that fell in here, but add uchidei trumas meiser shel tevel, the echad mimeya min meiser. You have to both take out trumas meiser shel tevel, which is going to be again 1 if there was 100, and the echad mimeya from the meiser, 1/100 of the meiser. The year tevel kuloi. In such a case, you're going to have the issue of dimua. And what happens when you have a dimua? So now you can't just separate it. Now that you owe, and you're going to lose a lot of money now, because when you sell it to a kohen, you're selling it with the mei truma, which is a lot cheaper. The nimsa mafsid min ha-meiser echad mi mei boy shukmei trumas meiser Numbers will case, for example, meya tevel, from which you have to remove. Again, the tevel is that you already removed truma. All you need to do is remove the one, and it fell, let's say, in 200 sa'ah of Maiserish, and that's tabul, from which you would have to remove 20. So Atkan, the coin would have gotten totally from this mixture 21. Had it not had gotten mixed, 20 from one and 1 from the other. Now it got all mixed together. So first, mafresh. Oh, it's the case here is that the meiser is meruba. When the meiser is meruba, what you take out will be the tevel part. So you're not taking out the 100 that fell in. You have to take out meya v'shalosh. Like we just said, sai, you have to add the amount of trumas meiser from the tevel, and then you have to add not 20, but 2% from that which was meiser, that was tevel. So 1 and the other 2, you have to take out 103. Bahashalosh came trumas meiser of meya of tevel. V'shir trumas meiser mimosai meiser kedei shelo yivay litzuzan kamaisai. Again, you always have to take off this extra amount, like the Rambam explained in Allah Gimel, as a hecker, to know which one will be the one that you took out. So really, what will end up over here is you're going to end up taking out 19.7. Right? Exactly. You're going to take up 19.7 from the Meiser. And now you're taking out from the 103, you're taking out also 10%, 1%. Halacha Zay. Says the Rambam, for people who have the pictures, it's going to be very helpful. If you have a box, you have 10 rows of 10 barrels of wine. And the kava kad achas mishura hachitzoyne meiser ala meiser al mokem ach. And you're saying that one from the outer row, 1 barrel should be meiser ala meiser for that which I owe on another location. In other words, you were koiveya 1 barrel. You did not clarify which one of the barrel. And whenever you make such a kivius, you have to follow that which you said. So how do we make sure that what you are taking will be from the shura hachitzoyna? That Rambam gives you a simple solution. For people who have the chayenus, it's going to be the top picture. What you do is you take 2 barrels, even though you only have to give 1. But 1 second, you take 2 barrels, and they have to come from a diagonal line. Because the advantage is, if you look at the picture, you'll notice that when you take out 1 from the top left and the other one, let's say from the bottom right, every direction is covered by half of these 2 barrels. So you took from whichever you meant in the shura hachitzoyna is for sure going to be covered, but you only have to give 1 barrel. So you mix them together. And from this mixture, you give half of it. In other words, you ended up giving to the kohen 1 barrel, and for sure it was from whichever shura hachitzoyna that you had in mind. Halacha ches. Keva b'chatzi shura hachitzoyna. If you said I'm giving it from half of an outer row, and you don't know ezi chatzi shura noitel. So here, that's going to be picture number 2, the middle picture here in the chayenus. You're going to take 4 barrels. These 4 barrels, you have 8 halves. And every shura is covered by one of these 8 halves. And here again, you're going to mix them all together. And then from this mixture, you're going to give a quarter of it, which will be 1 barrel, which for sure is chatzi shura hachitzoyna. Furthermore, next case, I'm going to give my trumas meiser from a row. From which row? You don't know which row you had in mind. So the Rambam says, you take this box of 100 barrels, you make a diagonal line, and you give, and the vert will be, you're going to remove all of those 10 of the diagonal line. Each one is from another row. Here again, you mix them all together. You only have to give 1. You mix it all together and you give 1 or 10% of that to the kohen. And the final case, kava b'chatzi shura, and you didn't specify which chatzi shura. So here you're going to make, if you have the picture, it's very simple. You're going to make a X. Noitel shtei shuras balachsa, and you have to make 2 diagonal lines, and you're going to take out all of these barrels, so you have chatzi of every shura, and you're going to mix them all together. And then you're going to be mafresh. Halacha 9, the final halacha. Kava ha'maisa b'kad achas mehem any day ezehi. So then you have to take from every single barrel 1/100. The keveyo or mafresh kedei kad achas meiser. The point of this is very simple. That when you are koiveya meiseres, that means when you say that I'm going to be taking meisers from a specific location, even before you made the hafrasha, you're mechuyev to follow your kaviyas. So if your kaviyas is vague, you have to do something that will cover all of the possibilities, and only then did you fulfill your vow. We're learning today's 3rd chapter, Pedic Test. Pedic Test has 14 halachas. Many times we learn in Gemara about the Mai. This is ground zero, and the Rambam, which does something that's not unique, but it's very rare. The Rambam is going to give us the history behind the Mai. Why did Chazal make the takana of the Mai, exactly what it means? And the main point of halacha test won't only be about the Mai, but it's going to make clear that there's Kriya Shem and there's Hafrasha. Don't confuse one with the other when it comes to separating Trumas or Maisers. Okay, Pedic Test has 14 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph. Says the Rambam, B'yimei Yochanan Kohen Gadol. Which Yochanan Kohen Gadol? The Kohen Gadol that came after Shimon HaTzadik. And we know Shimon HaTzadik, there's a big machloikas when you ask a person, who was the first Kohen Gadol B'zman Bayesheni? Remember that? The Sugya? So many people say Shimon HaTzadik. Well, yes and no, because Ezra, HaKohen, according to some, he was considered the first Kohen Gadol. It's not clear for how many years he served, because the Cheshbonis, I think the Gemara makes in Yuma, about the over 300 Kahanim Gedolim B'zman Bayesheni, because we deduct, it was 420 years, but we deduct Shimon HaTzadik was 40. Yochanan Kohen Gadol was a Kohen Gadol for 80 years. How will we explain this? And then he became a Tzeduki. You know, Hasidim say the pshat there is that he was a Kohen Gadol for 80 years. Kohen Gadol for 80 years. So after that amount of time, he became a Tzeduki in his own eyes. He began to consider himself a big tzaddik. That was trying to minimize the pshat that he mamish became a Tzeduki. He became a heretic. How could you explain that? Anyway, so the Gemara makes the cheshbon. That's the 120 years, 40 and 80. And then you have the other 300 Kahanim Gedolim that tragically, they did not live out the year. Another thing, it's not the way people say that they didn't die in the Kodesh HaKodshim. It did happen one time. Not that if you're not worthy, you passed away in there, even though they went with their rope tied around them. Normally, they were not Moitzah Shanaisa. But really, again, many people opine that Ezra was considered a Kohen Gadol. We don't know clearly for how long he served. The Rambam's point is the Yochanan Kohen Gadol that served after Shimon HaTzadik during his lifetime, during the times of his reign, Sholchu Beis Din HaGadol, Ubatku B'chol Gevul Yisrael, and they found Shahakoil Zehirin Betruma Gedola, and everyone separated the 2% of Mafrish and Oisa. And let me add something, Aval Ma'aser Ishayin, and Ma'aser Sheni, or during the 4th and 6th year, and the Ma'aser Ani, some of them were more lenient. And I want you to know that even during that time, the amount of amaratzim that did not separate all of the tevel, that did not make, like we learned in the previous chapter, chulin misukanim, was only a minority, was not a majority. Had it been a majority, then you have dinei toida that you have to follow the roif. Really, without the takanas chachamim, one still would have been allowed to rely on the roif. However, but since they realized that it's a substantial minority, lefikach gazru shalayi neman ala maisres, who can we trust that they separated all of the tithings? Ela anosham nemanam kshedim. Aval abi haaretz, we consider their produce in the state of a doubt. That's the point. Point is, even if you ask them, did you separate all of the maesters? And they say yes, The Chazal then says you may not trust him. You may not trust him not regarding Truma Gedolah, but you may not trust him regarding everything that comes afterwards, and that is what we call the mai. The mai means this mai. What is it? We don't know. Halacha beis. Now, v'hiskinu shelo yia adam mafresh min adamai elo trumas meiser shehu mepnei shehu avei misa. And it's ironic because if people would have been more learned, as we keep on learning, that the owner has the right to separate trumas meiser. He doesn't have to give that to the Levi. And Trumas Meiser also still, if it's Tavel from Trumas Meiser, you still have the Misa B'dei Shamayim. And they were careful about it, but they didn't know how to do it. So the 2% was separated. Now that there is the Mai, what do you actually have to give? Only the Trumas Meiser. And then Meiser Sheni, you're giving it to yourself. And therefore, since there's no financial loss, even though you have to eat it in Yerushalayim, it's not called a financial loss. But even though there is a suffix whether Meiser Rishon was removed, nevertheless, Meiser Rishon or Meiser Ani, which is a purely financial obligation, because since it is a suffix, we even after the takana, we follow the rule. Now, another step, you cannot separate Trumas Meiser if you don't have Meiser Rishon. So you will be separating Meiser Rishon. Elama, you're going to be separating Meiser Rishon only to have something from which to take the Trumas Meiser, which you'll give to the Kohen. But then the remaining 9, you're going to keep. You tell the Levi, and by the way, if he can somehow bring an ayah, I don't know how, then Taka, he'll take it. But until he brings the ayah, bring it and take it. And if you don't bring the ayah, I'm keeping it. Okay, so that's good to remember. Every time you speak about the Mai, what do you have to be mafresh? Well, you have to be mafresh, Meiser Rishon, not to give it just a hafrasha. From it, you actually remove 1, right? 10% from 10%, and that you give to the Kohen. You separate Meiser Sheni, and you have to either eat it in Yerushalayim or you have to redeem it. You separate the Meiser Ani, but you don't give it. And everything else now is chul and misukon. Halacha yigim. You don't have to physically separate it, but you can't say, oh, since anyways I will not be giving it to an ani, so why should I go through the step of what? Of Kriya Shem? Kriya Shem means you're making an announcement. Still, Tzarech Likras L'Shem. Likras L'Shem means you're designating it. There's designation and there's separation. How do you designate it? You say that Iser Masha Yesh Kan, 10% is Meiser Ani. Kedei, now again, the yesterday's chapter was also difficult with a different Gersois in the Rambam. Kedei Likboya Maser Sheni. So let's go like this. Every right from the 7-year cycle, 1 year Shemitah, you separate nothing. But from the other 6 years, so 4 of the 6, first, second, fourth, and fifth, you separate after Meiser Rishon, Meiser Sheni. The Rambam is saying, why do you even have to do Kriya Shem? He's explaining why. Because if you're not going to do even Kriya Shem regarding the second type during the 3rd and 6th for Meiser Ani, then you might not do the Meiser Sheni designation, which you're chayav to do, because since it goes to you, we don't say Hamoitzi Mechaveru Olav Arayah. No. You have to take it to Yerushalayim. So that's what Kedei Likvay Meiser Sheni. Shemaiser Ani Bashlishis V'Shishis is in the place of Meiser Sheni Shlosha Yimei HaShavua. So therefore, even during the 3rd and the 6th year, you have to be Koyra Shem, not physical, but like this, you'll remember that after Kriya Shem on Meiser Rishon, which you always have to do in order to be mafresh Meiser Mena Meiser, you're not done yet. You have to still make another Kriya Shem, even though on Meiser Ani you won't separate it, and by Meiser Sheni you have to make the hafrasha. Okay, halacha dal, clear. Kishmafrishin and other mind. Trumas Meiser, when you actually separate it, like we just mentioned, and when you actually separate Meiser Sheni, even though normally you make a bracha, not over here. Birchas HaMitzvahs, but it's a suffix. Because you might not be mechuyev. And lefika, another detail, mutal afrishin kishu orain. As when we learn Hilchas Challah, the only hafrasha that can be done unclothed is Challah. That's the whole topic over there. We'll get to when we learn there, because it's done when you're sitting. If a woman does it, she can do it because she's considered covered. But anyways, over here, there's no issue of being unclothed. What's the big yichus? I don't know, but it looks like it's advantageous. Okay, halacha hey. So let's go. First, mafrish kidei trumas meiser. Really, what you will be separating will only be the 1%. That has to actually be separated. Now, guys, here's the challenge. Just remember the Nakuda. I'm going to be mafrish 1% of what I have. But I cannot be mafrish trumas meiser if I didn't first designate my sedation. The point here is that I only have to designate the meiserishin. I don't have to physically go through the trouble of separating the meiserishin. Separate 1%. It's nothing yet. Before you were koyed shame on meiserishin, this is still nothing, but at least you have it. So you were mafresh to 1%. And you put it on the side. And then you say, this is meiser. Meiser means this is going to be the meiser min ha-meiser. But before you get there, you need to have 10% meiserishin. The shar meiser samuchloi. But let's say if it's physical things, let's say you have 100 apples, just to make it simple. Take off one apple. And you put it just, touching any side of the barrel and say this and the 9 adjacent is my sedition. In other words, the other 9 you didn't have to move. Now you're saying they're all together. They have to all be together. The my sedition has to be together. Because you began by separating it as meiserishin, this and the other 9 that's near it. That which I said first, this, which is the one that you physically separated, now, and now, why? What is that I'm getting to? Now that we said that meiserishin does not have to be given to the Levi, why do you have to do that? Why can't you just take off one and say, this is Trumas Meiser? The Rambam says, which means, just to know, if you would have just separated Meiser, Min HaMeiser, it will be effective. But Lachatchila, you don't do so. What did you benefit? You didn't have to schlep 9 of the apples. You just took off one, but you put it next to anywhere you want. You say this, and the 9 near it is Meiser edition. And now this is Trumas Meiser. And like we learned, not to forget doing it on the years 1, 2, and 4, 5, years 3 and 6, you also separate Meiser Ani, even though you do not give it to the Ani. Halacha Vav. Umuter lahafresh Meiser Sheni koidem harishin b'demai. Normally, lachatchili, you have to follow the Seder. Not over here. Another thing that you are allowed to do, Meiser Sheni Shalpedus Elu are in the northern part of this silo, or the northern part of this basket, or in the southern part. In other words, you don't have to physically separate it, since anyways you're not planning to take this to Yerushalayim. You have the option of redeeming it over money. You know the value of the Meiser Sheni percent. You know the value, and you're the owner. You have to add a chaimish. Fine. I don't remember if you add a chaimish on the Mai. We'll see soon. But the point is, since also you're going to be redeeming it, you don't have to physically separate it. You only have to be Kiri Hashem, but Kiri Hashem with a location, not stam. The 10% of Meiser Sheni, that's not good enough. And then you say, we're speaking about Anachtam Ha'aretz. Mafresh mimeno, not only Trumas Meiser, but here also, Chala is also something that misafik you have to separate. And va'omer, echad mimeya, mima sheyesh kan, harehu Meiser, but that's not good enough, because you have to have first the other part of the Meiser edition. Usha'ar Meiser hasamuchloi, that's number 1. And again, you go back and you're saying that the one that I began with, which was only 1%, also Trumas Meiser al Sha'ar HaMeiser hasamuchloi, and then you add the Hayoser al Echad Mimeya Sheyesh Pozesh Efrashti Hareu Chalom. You have to also separate the Chalom. Okay. Very good. And then you have to make this designation of location or Meiser Sheni, which is either B'tzvayno or B'dorayma. That's enough. You don't move anything, but at least you gave it a location. And now, so you dealt with Meiser Rishon, Meiser Mena Meiser. You dealt with Chala. You dealt with Meiser Sheni. And now you have Chulin Misukanin. Halacha Zayin. Let's go to a case where you have someone eating with you, and the guest doesn't trust the balabayis. You see, all of these from issues always existed. What do? So the Rambam is not saying don't go there. You have to be smarter. You have to know how to do it. You have to go there, and you have to resolve the problem. But who, meaning the guest, is not mom and the balabayis, that he separated the maisris. So here's another detail. The detail here is that normally we're not allowed to be Torah Masir on Shabbos because it's tikkun keli. It's not a tikkun that's discernible to the eye, but midrabanan it's called makam patish tikkun. It's a tikkun. Here, Rabbi Yaakov, it's only a drabanan. Maybe it's already masukin. So since it's maybe already masukin, they were lenient. But how ideally should you do it? So prior to going there, you were invited Erev Shabbos. So Omer May Erev Shabbos, and I want you to know that this heter of making such a declaration, you're not even in front of the food, is only L'tzoyrech Shabbos. You say like this, Ma sha'ani osid lahafresh l'machar is already from now Meiser. But again, why do you really only have to separate? Means if I'm a guest and I'm eating in someone's house and I don't trust them, I will actually have to take off 1%. But saying the whole thing, I take off one, and then I say this one, and the 9 near it is my sedition for everything else, which won't be given to the Levi, but the first one, the guest is actually going to end up making a separation, which will have to be given to a kohen. And many, did people get insulted? I think not going to someone's house is a greater insult. So they knew that, and they got used to it, that the chaver is going to be a misakin. So Vashar and Vashar Ma'isomachloi and Vazesha, she see Ma'ised, the original 1%, also Trumas Ma'ised Alashar Asamachloi, and it's not enough yet. Now, Umaiser Sheni B'tzvaynu Ebedroimai Harehu Mechul Lalamai. So we're saying something interesting, that if I'm a guest in your house, and I don't trust your food, I don't mean you, I mean someone else. Not only do I have to separate 1% for Trumas Meiser, Rabbi Yaakov, I have to separate Meiser Sheni, because it's like my food now, and I will have to be Mechalalit al Ma'is. Now, hold on, how am I even allowed to make such a pre-statement? And what's the chiddush? Even though it's not in your reshus, that's the chiddush. Abal bevadai, if there's a definite obligation, I am allowed to make a stipulation, even if I'm not in front of the food, providing the food is in my domain. Okay, Ketzad goes on this last din. Ketzad halacha ches is, where are you going to find a scenario where you're being mafresh on something that vadai needs to have separation, even though it's not in front of you, but it has to be on your reshus? That will be the case. I have on Friday, I have 100 figs that it's in my house, but I am not in my house yet. I'm in the Beis HaMedrash, or a working man on Basada. And even though my goal is to come home before Shabbos, if I'm going to come home, I'm going to be able to make a proper separation. But I'm afraid that I won't get there prior to Shabbos. And one thing is a given that the Eni Yochel Aser b'Shabbos, that's the Takonos Chachamim. So here again, since I'm Vadai Chayev, here also, L'tzoyrech Shabbos, I don't have to be in front of it, but it has to be in my reshus. That's the case. On Shabbos, here it's Shnei Te'edim, guys, because we're speaking about someone who has Vadei Tevel. Vadei Tevel, you got to separate, right? 2% Truma, B'chulei. So 2% Te'edim, Truma. And then the Eser Shani Mafresh, Achrei will be my sedishim. And then the 9, all this is approximation. Shani Mafresh, Achrei, my Sheni. And then, guys, on Shabbos Kodesh, I actually make the separation and I can eat it. Here it's also a heter l'tzoyrech Shabbos, but that's only valid. You know why? Because the food is in my reshus. Going back to halacha zayin, masha'en kain. If I'm going to be your guest tomorrow, if the issue is only demai, I'm even allowed to make this pre-Shabbos stipulation, even though it's not a my reshus. Beautiful. Halacha tes. So now I made the Tanai. Since I made the Tanai, it's not considered mamash a violation of being mafresh on Shabbos. But when I am your guest on your table, I'm not going to make a big loud statement. Why not? Because it should not be like a person is separating Trumas or Maasros on Shabbos. But I have to verbalize it. I have to be lirchosh b'sfasav. You're masakin the Shabbos. No, because I made the Tanai prior. But the point that Rambam wants to make is that don't say that since I said it Erev Shabbos, that's enough of a statement. That just allowed you to do it now on Shabbos. But when you separate, in the case of Demayu, it's really only 1%, it's only really physically separating, and you're speaking about that the value of 10% is going to be here, and then I'm going to be machal and on my money, you have to say those words on Shabbos. Now, the table, sheyesh, all of Tanai Zem. Let's go back. The Rambam is going back and forth. This is going back to Halacha Ches when you have Tevel Vadai. The Rambam said, L'tzoyrech Shabbos, pre-Shabbos, as long as it is in your Reshus, you can make these declarations. So now that I'm going to be allowed to separate it on Shabbos Kodesh, normally Tevel has a din of Muktzah. Why is Tevel Muktzah? Because you can't eat it. But here, you will be allowed to be masakin it. So now, Mutal Atal for Shabbos, even before you are mafresh it, because it's not muksa. How great is that? Now, how do you do it? By tevel vadai, the noison einav b'tzadzeh, v'oicher es hasha'or. Oh, so I guess here you can't. A few didn't. We began today in Perek Zayin the rule that by dinei Torah we don't say breira. So the Rambam is addressing, they're trying to minimize being mesakered on Shabbos. So why don't you have a better option? Don't do anything right now. Don't eat the whole thing. And then be mafresh after Shabbos. If we would say the principle of breira, then retroactively what you ate was mesukan. Since, again, we're speaking the end of halacha test, we're speaking about tevel vadai. So in other words, you're chayev midoiraisa to make a separation. You can't minimize the violation of the rabbinic law of not separating it on Shabbos by doing it later. No, you'll have to be noisem einov on Shabbos, right, which is some step of hatrasha, and only then are you able to eat the rest of it. Another interesting detail. It looks like noisem einov means that here it's mine. Not like when I'm a guest in the house of the Amaretz, I don't have to be lirchosh b'sfasa. All of these things gavaldik. In other words, the beginning of halacha tes is by demai. There, I have to be lirchosh b'sfasa if I made a pre-tanai before I came into Shabbos. Here in the end of tes, we're speaking about vadai. We're trying to minimize. That's the word, Yaakov. Don't verbalize it if it's not needed. Because I want to go away as much as I could from doing something that gives the appearance that I, from the outset, was mafresh trumas or maasros on Shabbos, and I didn't because I made it tonight before Shabbos. But I will at least have to be nice and einov. Halacha yud. Here, go back. Here, a guy.
Isn't the pshat that he doesn't know where exactly it is? He's nice and einov on the corner, not to eat it.
That's fine. You know, I'm deciding I'm going to separate everything from here. Now I'll eat from there. But you have to do nois and einov. We're trying to avoid doing the minimum possible. Doing nothing, I can't do because ein bereira by dinei Torah. Lirchash b'sfasav, you don't need to because it's yours. In the case of you being a guest, it's not even yours. There's a certain chutzpah element. Once you're a guest in someone's house, and you're taking the food that they're giving it to you, and you're making an afrasha, and then you're going to be the big knacker. You're going to give it to a kohen. Okay, halacha. This is also on Shabbos. He's giving you a cup to drink. So Omer, you say that ma sha'ani asid l'shayir b'shuli akois. See, by something physical, it's easy to make a separation. You take off an apple. What are you going to do? You have what? You have you're gonna ask the balabas to give you another cup. You're trying to minimize that. So you just say that whatever will remain b'shuli akois, that will be meiser. Meiser means meiser ben meiser. But you can't just separate 1%. You have to separate 10%. So you make the statement. We keep on learning. Usha'ar meiser samuchloi, and everything that's near it will be the additional totaling 10%. Here you're not doing breda. Here you're making a statement around. Correct. I take it back. Here you're actually leaving it in the bottom of the cup. You're making the statement now. You're not using breda. What the chiddush will be is that normally when it comes to liquids, we just learned that liquids always intermingle. When I have tevel vada Yaakov, I cannot leave the liquid in there. Since it's demai, you could do that, but it's not bereda because you're making the statement now. And then you add, and meiser sheni will be in the top of the cup, and that meiser sheni I'm going to be mechal on money. The shoyse umaniach kadei truma. No, you're right. It's also bereda. The shoyse umaniach kadei trumas meiser b'shuli yakois. Yeah, because the physical separation will be done later, since it's the rabbanan yesh bereda. And again, another chiddush is that since bereda, I'm not worried about the intermingling. If my separation would be effective now, then it would not be good. Because if there's liquid that's truma, that's meiser, it affects all of the liquid in the cup. I'm only going to separate it after I left it. Since it's the mine, yesh bereda, exactly. Halacha yudal. If I'm going to invite my friend to join me in a drinking party on Shabbos, of Shabbos, I'll call Mashiyishta Etzloi. As we learned when it comes to food in Halacha Zayin. Furthermore, Halacha Yudal, Chein, Poyel, She'ena Maminoi, Labalabayis, right? That Balabayis is an Amaretz, and you're the worker. You take care of physical one. One is out of 100. But again, you can't just separate Trumas Meiser without designating the location of Meiser Rishon. So you physically take one. But you say this one and V'teisha boys achareha are asuyes Meiser alameya sha'ani yosed lecho. And let me go back now to the one that I physically separated. This now is the 10% from the 10%. So now you cover Trumas Meiser. Next step is Meiser Sheni, which you don't have to physically separate. You have to just designate and then be machal on money. And you give the groigeres sheifres for client, and you're good to go. V'hapoyel mafrish la'atzmoi demei Meiser Sheni. Shetnai bezenu shetia trumas meiser mishal balabayis or meiser sheni mishal poyel. Now the Rambam is giving you another angle over here. Hold on. I'm getting the balabas is giving me a certain amount of produce. Here's my question: when I separate the money of the meiser sheni, from whose pocket does it come? Comes from my pocket. But when I separated that one groigeris, let's say the balabas will allow me to eat 15 groigeris. I'm using one because I don't trust the balabas that he's fully kosher. Do I have the right to eat another 15? Or no, I already took off one. So he's saying you're concerning that which you have to give to the kohen. That is Mishal Balabayas. So if the agreement was I get to eat for every snack 15 figs, I will eat my 15 figs. Really, it means that the one fig came out of the pocket of the balabais. But the meiser sheni and the money that I'm using, that has to be my money because the balabas is not. I'm not losing anything at the end. So why should the balabas have to give me another 10%? That was not the agreement. Halacha yud beis. Hanachtoimin bakers. Even though we're saying the whole time Meiser Sheni is not a money loss, it is a money loss. It's some loss Because you have to go, you have all this money that you cannot use over here, you have to use it only in Yerushalayim. And here we're speaking about a baker. A baker has tremendous amounts of it. He does it for business. And he's buying the flour and lav dafka from Chaveda. So we say that a nachtoim doesn't have to separate Meiser Sheni. But the only thing that a nachtoim will have to separate will be Trumas Meiser Milvad. Which is another separation, which is also chalas like Truma that a nachtoim will have to make. Now, halakeyach, whoever halakeyach from a nachtoim. So don't think that this demai won't have Meiser Sheni taken from it. It will have. They shifted the obligation away from the baker on the final consumer. The lekeach has to be Meiser Sheni. Great. So in other words, if I'm buying stuff from a nachtam that's a chaver, I still have a Meiser Sheni concern. The moicher bechanusoi. And let's add something. What the Chazal say the following: the reason why they took this obligation away from the Nachtaim, why did they take it away from him? Again, Meiser Sheni is not considered a real money loss because the sages then see. There's a whole different society that we are familiar today in the Western world. There is free competition. It's free competition, which keeps the prices down. At least that's the theory. By Dinei Toida, there isn't free competition. There's a Sagas Gavul, which means if you have a bakery, another baker cannot open up a shop right next to you. Cannot do that. And what's the downside is, the one baker is going to hike the prices. And we're speaking about basic foods. So the Beis Din was obligated to go around and to make sure that the prices are low with all of the dinim we're going to learn by Oina'ah. There's a certain allowed amount of profit, which is normally the sixth and not more than that. So since you're limiting the profit that the baker can make, to be machayev the baker, not to separate the Meiser Sheni money, even though he has to eat it in Yerushalayim, he gets to keep it, that they didn't want to do. But all of that is when the guy is selling his product in a place where he is going to be visible, and if he's going to charge another prutas to cover his travel trip to Yerushalayim, the Beis Din is going to tell him lower your prices. The moment this guy is a baker, but he's a baker clandestine. So he's not under the eyes of the Beis Din that are keeping his prices the lowest possible. So this guy is going to, I'm a boutique baker. You want to buy mine, you're going to pay extra. The moment the guy is going to be de facto taking more profit, they put the chiyuv back on Meiser Sheni on him. In other words, he's not under the observation of the inflation police, which means this guy is charging more than normal. Then you go back to the normal din. You bought your flour from an Amma Aretz. I'm sorry, my friend. You got to separate Meiser Sheni. Then Chayv La'apish Af Meiser Sheni. Allah Yudgim. Shnayim shebatzru karmeim b'toich gas achas. Two people harvested the vineyard into a common gas. And so now two people are together. One guy is a chaver, the other guy is an Amma Aretz. The wine is all mixed together. He already separated everything he needed to separate. For example, let's give numbers. We are partners 50-50. And now there's so much wine that when I'm taking my share, I'm taking 200 loig of wine. Now let's go that from this 200 loig of wine, half of it came from the grape of the Amma Aretz. That's 100. From that 100, you have to separate one because of Trumas Meiser. I already separated from my grapes all of the Trumas Meisers. Doesn't matter. From 2 loig, normally it would be, from 200, it would be 2. But I don't have to take off 2 because half of it came from my product. In other words, I have to take off 1% of half. And here again, not 10% from 200 from Meiser Sheni? No, but 10% from half. The Eser Meiser Sheni. Keneged Hamei Aloik. Rambam is explaining why don't you have to do it on the whole thing? His was removed. Now there's another word over here. When it comes to liquids and when it comes to partnerships, and we're speaking about Dini Torah, let's word it like this. Every single drop has in it a mixture of both balabata. And not Beredo. Taking half. I'm taking my half. My half was I took off all the Turbos Amaisis before. We don't say that. And that's just an example. And you have to know that from the outside. That means if you have a partnership with an Amal Aretz, you have to be aware of all of the money that this is going to be costing you. Well, it's going to be the din when Mashiach will come. Without any doubt, people then will become learned. People are going to be separating Trumos Amaisris. I don't think these din will be shaykh. Not that Rambam writes Kol HaTerekula. It's not that everything that Rambam writes. It's only if it's going to even. Rambam is the only one that writes Hilchos HaMashiach, but not everything in Rambam is Hilchos HaMashiach. What's the Mai is dafka because that's why the Rambam gave the history that we should be aware that the whole Takanas Demai is only when you know that there's a miyut that's chashuv, sadly, of people that are not giving all of the Trumos Umaises, and when that will change, that's what he's saying. It's not like a takana, you have to have a basin to be mavatalit. We'll find out. Maybe you don't even need that. It's a reaction towards the reality that there's too many people not giving Trumos Umaises. If that's a different reality, then you can be soymech that people tie